Now we welcome back to the podcast Glenn Loury, the Merton P. Stoltz Professor of Social Sciences and Professor of Economics at Brown. Professor Loury has published mainly in the areas of applied microeconomic theory, game theory, industrial organization, natural resource economics, and the economics of race and equality. He's got a podcast, The Glenn Show. Where's it going to be? The only place you need to go for your podcast, and that is the Ricochet Audio Network. It debuts now, and we thank you for joining the show. Tell our listeners about The Glenn Show.
Oh, well, I'm just holding forth over there. I used to be at the bloggingheads.tv platform. Robert Wright is the proprietor there. And we both fancy ourselves trying to save the world. I'm trying to save it from wokeness, and he's trying to save it from zero-sum thinking where everybody competes themselves into a dead end. But, I'm an economist with an interest in philosophy and politics, and try to keep it at a high level, interview people more or less across the spectrum. But I have ongoing conversation with John McWhorter, the linguist at Columbia, who is every other week a guest on the Glenn Show. And our beat is race. It's we call ourselves the woke busters because there's so much nonsense as we see it, and we try to dispel some of that.
So it's a weekly show.
It's a weekly show, yes.
Weekly show. So if you go to Apple or Stitcher or you can download it on Ricochet.com. It's a weekly show. It's called The Glenn Show. Glenn, I have a question. I've never put this question to you. Your view is that the country is in all kinds of ways in serious trouble. And I have seen you get angry, and I have seen heard you become really passionate, but your fundamental mode of discourse and presentation, your default mode is cheerfulness. Why is that?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know what to say to that, Peter, but except that thank you and gratitude, because that's how I would have it. I would have myself to be received in that way. My creative director, he's a Russian named Nikita Petrov, who helps me produce The Glenn Show, very talented young man, has remarked to me in our conversation, he says, "You just seem to be happy. Despite all of the madness, you seem to be happy." Now I'm in my 70s. But I don't look it and I don't feel it. I'm a widower who remarried 4 years ago to a wonderful woman who happens to be a Bernard Sanders supporter, a point of which I've made a lot of hay at the Glenn Show because it creates a kind of literary situation. This is epic. This is epic, marriage. But we're happy. So maybe I'm happy. I don't know. I'm not optimistic, Peter. If I allow myself to dwell on where we are with riots in the streets and the trashing of what I think are fundamental values. People proud to denounce capitalism. People running around talking about America as a, white supremacist, racist empire. I don't know. Miscreants who find themselves in trouble of their own making with law enforcement become heroes. They get state funerals and presidents speak to them at their bedside. These are troubling things. People want to get rid of the test, as if the test of proficiency of someone was itself the enemy. The tail wags the dog here. I could go on, but so I'm not exactly optimistic, but I'm trying to live each moment as fully as I can. So.
Okay. Glenn, the moment this happened, I thought of you, and now here we are talking. So I'm going to ask you about it. We're having a recall election here in California. Early voting has already begun. I've already cast my ballot. The voting begins at September 14th. According to the polling, it's too close to call. There are two questions on the ballot. Question number 1 is whether the current governor, Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, should or should not be recalled. Yes, recall. No, don't recall.
Right.
Question number 2 is, if he is recalled, which of the following 45, and there are 45 names on the ballot, which of the following 45 people should succeed him? One of those 45 people. So on question number 1, the polling indicates it's just too close to call. It's up and down, and it's going to be very close. It'll all depend on actual turnout, and pollsters don't quite know how to poll turnout in recall elections because they happen so infrequently. But one point on which the polls are unanimous is that if the recall does go through, the very likely winner will be Larry Elder, who of all the 45 candidates is the only person who's polling in double digits. All right, Larry is a conservative. He's running as a Republican. He is also an African American. I don't know whether you know Larry. I'm sure you know who he is.
I know of him. I don't know him personally.
All right. And I don't know him well, but he's on the air out here in California, and we've had him on Ricochet. And I voted for Larry. I'm very happy to say I voted for Larry. But I thought, what a wonderful thing that in this moment of Black Lives Matters and we've had riots, here we have an African-American man running for governor and looking as though he has a real chance to win. And you know what happens? The press has attacked him savagely.
Yeah.
He's the black face of white supremacy.
That's exactly right. The LA Times headline. Right? Yeah. The LA Times, the black face of white supremacy. So what are we to... you may have I don't know whether we haven't talked about this before. You may have noticed I'm white.
Yeah,
I was just talking to friends down in Pasadena, which is a pretty white place, and Orange County. And they said I just had the most fun filling out a ballot that I've had in years because I voted for Larry Elder.
Wow.
Never even comes up in our conversation because he's conservative, because he has a chance to shake up the state. And the LA Times calls him the black face of white supremacy. What do we make of this?
Well, they're playing the cards that they've got. And I think it's probably a good thing that they're forced into that particular corner because he could seriously win. And they're frantic to try to prevent that from happening. I think it's an outrage. I mean, first of all, suppose there were an African-American Democrat, let's call him Barack Hussein Obama, and somebody were to call him the black face of, name it, socialism, anti-Americanism, or whatever it is, they would obviously be identified as a racist. What could be more racist? I mean, I'm not a racism monger. I don't grind that axe often, but what could be more presumptively racist than to characterize a serious person who could end up being governor of the state?
Governor of the biggest state in the union.
In such a manner. I mean, and moreover, it shows absolute contempt for the people who support him, like you.
Right. I
mean, who are you to vote for him then, if indeed he is what they propose him to be? You Yahoo. So they are simmering in their supercilious contempt for the people of California. I hope he wins, frankly. I don't have a vote, but I hope he wins.
It's a form of racial essentialism to say that because Larry Elder believes these things, these are things associated with whiteness, not just with whiteness, but with white supremacy. And ergo, these tax policies indicate that he's abrogated his authenticity in order to align himself with something that is contrary to his melanin concentration. It's nuts. But that's what we're getting when you mentioned the schools the other day, how a little while ago, that the tests are being rejiggered around so that now proficiency need not be a reasonable standard for graduation. Let's game this out. How does this work down the line when you have schools that turn out all of these populations who cannot read and can't do math and have no history? We all know that there's going to be a parallel set of institutions that will train the next generation of managerial elites, right? So how do the people who are attacking the schools today, what do they do to that to make that the equity machine that they want it to be? Or do they just have to sit back and wait for the people who run those institutions to go woke and destroy them themselves?
Oh, James, that was a mouthful. I guess in reaction, I think a couple of things. I think the Chinese are not waiting for us to sort out our various culture war things. They're actually mastering the skills that you need to have a 21st century economic dynamo run the world. We're not doing that. We're playing in our sandbox here. I think here's the thing. Too many of us are prepared to sacrifice the very institutions that allow us to be prosperous and free because some of us are not keeping up. I hate to be as blunt as this, but to the extent that the Blacks are failing, some people would prefer to disavow the very standards that we have for measuring achievement rather than to acknowledge that the Blacks are failing. And I'm Black. This is not an anti-Black statement that I'm making. So getting rid of the test is one of those things. Not enforcing the law is another one of those things. I don't know if you saw what came out of Chicago the other day, where people were attacked on North State Street, a mile from Rush Street and a mile from North Michigan Avenue, viciously by Black kids who were just idly roaming around on the street in the tourist-intensive entertainment part of the center of the city, and just cold cocking people, cars having to swerve around the white people lying prone in the street, having been beaten into unconsciousness by Black people. Now, again, I'm Black. I'm not grinding a racial axe, but how can America fail to notice that cities like Chicago are unwilling to enforce the law against Black people who are acting incivilly? Maybe that's why Larry Elder is on the verge of getting elected governor of California.
Glenn, James and I were talking about this. You certainly don't look, and you certainly don't behave like a man who's in his 70s, as you yourself said. No. But what your age means is that you're going to be in a good position to comment on this question. James and I were talking about it before you came on. We both remember back to the 70s when everything seemed to be going wrong, and this country seemed almost to be doing its best to lose the Cold War. And then came a revival in all kinds of ways. It was partly political, and I'm a Reagan guy, so of course I'm very happy to say that Ronald Reagan had something to do with it. But even take him out of the picture. There's an economic revival. There's a restoration of kind of national sense of morale. There's an economic revival in which, incidentally, African Americans benefited disproportionately. They did better on average than the rest of the population during that revival, made more gains. Okay. And so in some way, it seems as though it's the most important question in the world. What's it going to be for this country now? Are we stuck in a permanent 70s, or do we still have the cultural and intellectual and even spiritual resources for another revival, another restoration?
Gosh, that's a good question, Peter. And you honor me even by asking, as if I was having an answer to such a question. I was there, by the way, in 1978, 9, 80, 81, 82, 83. I remember that moment. I mean, I actually was a Jack Kemp, Jude Wanniski, George Gilder kind of conservative. I had been trained at MIT, which is a mildly left of center, but very serious economic program. So I came predisposed to a kind of Keynesian, kind of great society. But by the time I woke up in 1980, 81, 82, I was, Jack Kemp was calling me his favorite economist because of the supply side stuff in the social policy area. And I was reading all these guys, and they were mostly guys who were saying, well, what about the market? I mean, even Arthur Laffer, I say even with respect.
Yes.
Because,
Glenn, you and I were in the same circles in those days. I can't remember whether we met, but if we must have been at some lunch. Jude Wanniski and George. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that was only one part of it. Morning in America, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall and all of that. That was, you're right. And I don't know. I don't know if that can be replicated. We're so polarized and it's gotten so vicious. I don't know. I'm loath to just talk for the sake of talking because it puzzles me. how we're going to get ourselves back on track.
Might the problem be that back in those days, at least, you could feel a common devotion to the American experiment? I mean, I was a good liberal in college. I read The New Republic, but The New Republic was on the side of America. It had Charles Krauthammer, it had people who believed in
Fred Barnes was there.
It believed in the classical liberal project. And now we have a side of the politics that is increasingly devoted to the idea that America is inherently corrupt and evil. Its very marrow is illegitimate, and that so you can't stitch everybody together if one side of the debate believes that the country should not have, like Howard Zinn said, the world would be better off if we'd never been founded.
No, I think you're making a really interesting point, James. I know the New Republic because I used to write for them. I mean, I remember when Martin Peretz was the publisher there, when Leon Wieseltier was the literary editor. I remember when Fred Barnes would write for the New Republic, and Charles Krauthammer would write for the New Republic. And it was a left of center magazine. So you're making a very interesting point.
It's like, I.F. Stone's Weekly is all of a sudden what the New Republic used to be. Anyway, Peter, you had another question.
I have another question because I've been thinking. This is the show that you and I are going to do when you get out here to Hoover. I'm going to put you on my show, but I've been thinking more and more of a story that I'm about to tell, and I've been thinking I just want to interview some people whom I consider wise. Not about this or that specific subject, but just ask them questions about this moment in history because I consider them wise. And you're on the list, baby. So here's the story. Back in this is the late 70s when things were looking bad. Somebody visited my college campus. I went to Dartmouth. I know at Brown you may not care to hear the word Dartmouth uttered, but the rivalry between those two institutions is of long lasting. Malcolm Muggeridge, the great British journalist, now long dead, but Malcolm Muggeridge visited. And again, it was the 70s. Margaret Thatcher hadn't even appeared. And he said that he felt he was in the position of St. Augustine and other Romans. But St. Augustine is the figure he used. Because there's Augustine in North Africa looking across the Mediterranean in 410, if I recall, and Rome is sacked for the first time. So the civilization in which Augustine is raised and trained and that he loves is falling. And yet he comes down to us in history as St. Augustine, because even in that moment in history, he lived a good life. Things don't have to go well for individuals to lead good lives. So the question is, what does Glenn Loury say to his students at Brown? Of course, you being you're one of the few who would keep politics out of the classroom. But during office hours or over a beer, when students ask in one way or another, at that age, the bright students are always asking the same question: how do I lead a good life? How do I lead a meaningful life? And Professor Loury says what?
Well, I love teaching. And you're making me think about some of my students. You're making me think about Philip Trammell, who is now doing a PhD in economics at Oxford, but who, when I met him, was a freshman here at Brown. This would have been 8 years ago or so. You're making me think about David Sachs, who I just finished teaching a great books-oriented course on free speech. We start with Plato's Apology of Socrates, and we get to Milton's Areopagitica, his invective against the licensing of books. And John Stuart Mill, we spend a lot of time in the 20th century. We read Orwell and Havel and Alan Bloom, but this kid who is a classical piano virtuoso and a student of the Greek and Roman classical texts, reading in the languages, comes to me, in this moment of political crisis. I'm sitting in the economics department. He says, I can't breathe here intellectually. Please help me. And we begin a conversation. And we talk about a lot of things. We talk about Donald Trump in ways that he would dare never have talked about Donald. And I don't reveal his political orientation in saying this, nor do I reveal my own in terms of electoral voting. I simply say there was a very important question to the country between 2016 and 2020, which was, what did that presidency mean? And David and I managed to find a way of having a conversation about that that wasn't hemmed in and limited by his fear, which he would naturally feel any place else in my university, that were he to say anything affirmative to the uprising, which was the election of Donald Trump as president in 2016, that he would be, canceled, run out of town on a rail or whatever. I'm not answering your question exactly, Peter. What do I say? Because I don't have a doctrine. But I think the building of relationships, of trusting, nurturing relationships, and the nurturing is both ways. One reason that I look as young and vital as I do is because I have David Sachs in my life. He's an example. He's an example, but a splendid example. And it's at Brown, at Brown that I encountered this kid. I don't know. I say, slow down. I say, you don't know everything. I mean, come on, a little bit of intellectual modesty at the age of 20 would be a good idea. I say be serious, because there's so much froth and foam and insubstantial stuff that goes on in the academy. There's serious books to be read. There's serious people to talk to. There's serious ideas to engage. Don't waste your time here. This is a precious opportunity. 4 years of reflection, of unfettered access to everything that's been written and said. My God, I say, find the right people, because there's some clowns in this place. There's some people who are not worth your time, who are, holding down sinecures around here. And you might want to be, scrupulous about who you decide to spend your time with. I'm talking about faculty members, but I don't name names. I don't say it quite so bluntly, but I try to point out that there are gradations that are worthy of being respected.
Oh, name the names. Oh, all right. We'll leave that for the show. Listen.
Well, I'm uninhibited. I'm completely uninhibited. I think ethnic studies is a dead end. I think people should study sociology. They should study philosophy. They should study politics. They should study economics. And to the extent that they're interested in ethnic questions, they can apply those things to those questions. I think when you made an end run around the gatekeepers at the head of the disciplines to create separate channels of inquiry called ethnic studies, you made a profound mistake that has debased the currency of the university. There was a reason that it was a history department, because they did history there. They're the ones who should be the arbiters of what is good history to be done in the university, not someone who does Black history and thinks themselves therefore exempt. And of course, it could be Latino history, it could be women's history, et cetera.
It's almost as if history and literature contain ideals and lessons that transcend the politics of the day. I know it's a strange and radical thought, but listen,
that couldn't be true.
The Glenn Show coming on the Ricochet Audio Network. We advise everybody to listen to it, to his cast of woke slayers and sinecures, scoffers, and the rest of it. Thanks for being with us to push the show today. Can't wait to listen to it. And again, I hope that your duties on that show don't keep you from coming back here from time to time and talking with us. It's been a pleasure as ever.